My name is Rick Coleman. I am from Knoxville, Tennessee originally, and went to the University of Tennessee, majored in double E, and then went to National Instruments. Spent about 8 years at National Instruments, then started into Startup Land in Austin. And mostly a software guy through the ages, became more software as Startup Land, but moved to Nashville and working with a number of startups in Nashville. Started with Split Second, worked with David a lot on the Split Second project. Have you guys heard of Split Second? Okay, Split Second, Nashville startup. Basically, it's OnStar for any car. That's the one line. It's a device you can plug in with a 12-volt cigarette lighter, and it's got a big cell stack in it, GPS, accelerometer, and so it can detect a crash and call 911 immediately if the user doesn't do anything. It's an automatic call to 911. It has a speaker and a microphone, so you can actually establish voice communication. And then it actually works as 911 directly, but rather an emergency call center that can accept data. So Split Second sends GPS coordinates to the call center. They can triage the situation, involve 911, conference call if needed, dispatch, police officers, fire, things like that. That's a Nashville startup. Mel Taylor is the CEO. She's actually in Vegas right now at SEMA, hawking Split Second. So that's a neat startup. Smaller. I mean, you've written almost all the firmware on that thing.
Matthew and I both wrote. Okay. I'm not sure what our percentages are, but
yeah. And then we use Ackland Avenue, which is local software firm, to do the back end for Split Second and the website, and dashboard, and all that. Pretty cool product. Still kind of under the radar, but we're seeing what it can do. I also started working for Haven Lock a while back. Anybody heard of Haven Lock? Okay. Haven Lock is another Nashville startup, hardware, software. They, the guy that started is ex-military. He saw in Iraq and Afghanistan how folks and that would put this barrier in front of their doors to reinforce their doors. And also he kind of observed the physics of military bases, how they stop trucks from coming into military bases. They use a wedge design, comes out of the floor, comes out of the concrete rather, and basically transfers energy that's going this way into the ground. And it's a really good way to really massive weights from in front of a military base, things like that. So he took that concept and made a residential smart lock out of it. So it's a smart lock that there's not really a door. That would be the only one, but it mounts at the threshold of the door, and it has a wedge that comes up and down like that. There's a mechanical version that's completely just like a really nice chain lock. It's not a lot better than the chain lock. But then there's a version that we've been working on. We use a company called Unikey to do most of the back end for that, as well as some of the Bluetooth security hardware. They're out of Florida, and they are what's behind the Kivo smart lock, if you guys have ever seen those. So that Quickset is Kivo, and is the technology behind that. So it's also the technology behind Haven Lock, which is a Nashville startup. But what I work full-time for is called Initial State. How many people have heard of Initial State? Okay, cool. Initial State is a IoT dashboard and analytics platform. It's software exclusively, but we basically play nice with lots of different hardware. We write tutorials, talking to it through Raspberry Pi and whatever else devices are essentially connected to the internet. Anything that has the capability of doing SSL REST, just basic HTTP REST, can send data up to Initial State, and then we'll go through Initial State and we'll talk about it. I don't want this to be a shameless product promotion. I'm not like sell Initial State. I signed up just to be 15 minutes, and then you said that I'm the only one. So maybe we'll hang out for 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes or whatever, but I just want to give you a demo, show you the API, projects we have going, and then you guys can have an opportunity to talk to me. We can mess around with the API. We can do other things. We can talk about Haven Launch, whatever. So that's what tonight's all about. Cool? Cool. All right, so I did bring something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I just saw this across. Let's see. Can you see this at all? Is it? Oh no.
It was there till just a second. There you go.
Back. This thing. So a good buddy of mine in this state, he's a big micro brewer, and this thing, I think it's pretty new. It might have been out for a while, but it's gotten a little bit of notoriety in the homebrew community. Not homebrew in the sense of technical, in the sense of beer. Okay, just so you know. So this is actually a sensor. They call it because it can detect the gravity of beer. Gravity is, I don't know much about it. Just bear with me. But it's as you're brewing it, you want to get gravity basically back down to 1, where it's pretty much back to water. If the gravity is really high, you've heard of high gravity beer, it means it has more alcohol in it, essentially, but it also has the physics of this thing will float a little bit differently in a higher gravity versus a lower gravity. Okay, so this is a completely concealed, it's a white system with BLE, so it's just shooting out unsecure advertising BLE all the time. They actually have 4 or 5 colors, and that's the sort of division they have across it. If you have 2 black ones, they'll be colliding, right? So if you have multiple, whatever they call them in beer brewing, right? Cisterns that you want to measure, you have to get 2 different colors. So that's how they do it, and I think they have 5 or 6 different colors. So I've got one of these up here. You can come see it later, and it's floating in some water. I'll show you a little bit about my Raspberry Pi setup. So I've got it connected to Raspberry Pi. Should run in the background, but I'll just kill it for a second. And to show you a little bit about Nano Pi Tilt. There we go. So most of this I got from another guy who, it wasn't from the Tilt company, it was a guy who pretty much reverse engineered all the BLE signals. This is supposed to just go to an app. So he went through, and those are all the different, so that, what is that, 7 or 8 different colors. He figured out unique IDs for each color. He wrote a driver that's based on Bluetooth. And I don't know, you guys probably know way more about this than I do, but Raspberry Pi, even the Blues driver, the native Linux driver for Bluetooth, doesn't support BLE that well, and only has recently has like an experimental build. You might know more about that. Okay, well, I had to turn on some special flags in this. We've got a tutorial about this, so if you really are a beer brewer or know someone who this might be interesting to, this is actually pretty cool for that type of person, because it's kind of hard to measure this concept of gravity in beer. And one of the things when you're in the beer brewing process, you want to make sure that it settles out to whatever you're shooting for before you stop and start bottling it or put it in something else when you're brewing beer. So that's what's going on here. The part that is initial state. So initial state has a Python driver. We have a bunch of other SDKs and examples, all types of different languages and other things. We have a whole, I'll show you the website for that. It's pretty easy to grab one of those and tailor it for your application. This is Python, the Python SDK, and we actually have probably the best for Python. It's literally just a couple of calls. You new it up at the top, streamer equals, you pass it a few parameters, and we'll talk about how this works. And then later on, eventually this gets into the variables temperature average and gravity average, and then you just say streamer.log temperature, streamer.log. It's from the initial state perspective, it's 3 calls. So let's see what's going on. So this guy is floating, and here's the dashboard for this beer. So let's walk back and kind of learn a little bit about initial state and how this all works. So initial state is an IoT dashboard, an analytic system. It's essentially a place that you can stream data to and then build your own custom dashboard that is accessible through a phone and through any browser or anything like that. So let's kind of look back behind the scenes. I'm just going to go to initialstate.com, go to the documentation, just open up the API, because I like showing this because it really drives home what initial state is good at, which is it's very, very simple to do this. It's about the simplest API that I've ever really worked with. And we see people all the time say, it was very difficult for me to, and this might not be true for this room, right? But a lot of people that I talk to, it's very difficult for me to get up and running, to send data to anywhere, to make any of this work. And they were just amazed that something as simple as now I'm making it look more something as simple as bucket with a bucket key. So here's one line, create a bucket with a bucket key, and then start sending data. Post to this, and just create a big JSON object of data. So 2 calls, extremely simple, and we'll go in a little bit if that works. So I'm going to go and just start at the very beginning. I'm going to sign in to initial state. So here's initial state. So how many people have or are working on something that's internet connected or IoT, or they ever have the need? So you were talking about, is that like a moisture sensor that you get? Yeah. Okay. A lot of people build weather stations. A lot of people connect all types of. We have an integration with SmartThings, so a direct integration with SmartThings. If you have SmartThings at your house, you can just do an API list or programming, no need for programming, way to add SmartThings to a dashboard. So what I'm going to do is just start out and do kind of the canned demo of initial state. I think it's pretty cool. So here's initial state. There's a couple of concepts. One is a bucket. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create a new bucket here. Call it say create. There's a couple things behind this bucket that give it its identity and its security. The first is the bucket key, is the key for the bucket. The second is the access key, and this is your account's access key. So between those 2 things and SSL, you can send secure data to this dashboard without any things like OAuth or other things that are pretty complex to build into an edge device. So with the bucket key and the access key and a simple post, you can send data to initial state. Here's just an API endpoint. You might not be able to see some of this, but I'm just going to do it in the URL bar for a second because it's really easy just to send. You can test initial state by just sending data directly through the URL. You see this, it's brokered at initial state, that's our API. You see the access key is the second part, then the bucket key, and then I'm just going to say add another parameter and say brick equals 1. That obviously came from my computer and ended up on my computer, but I think, are you guys getting that this could come from anywhere? This is a simple API call that sent this data up to initial state, and I'm accessing this through a browser. Get a couple more data points for fun. Let's say Rick equals 2, equals 3, Rick equals 4. Okay, so now I've added a few data points and I'm starting to get a string. This is the simplest version of initial state. This is the simplest demo of initial state. It's really nice to first see this. It's really not hard. You can go through tons of tutorials and send data from all of your interesting little home devices to this single dashboard in minutes. And I really do mean that. It sounds kind of like a sales pitch, but it's super simple. And when I started this, I wasn't great at it, and I was able to get up and running really fast with our stuff. Okay? So once you're in initial state, it's a pretty platform to build a dashboard. First of all, there's kind of this notion of being able to stretch and make a of different visualizations. Go ahead and edit this tile and show you a couple of different ways that we can visualize data. You can change it from line graphs to bar charts to gauge style charts to histograms to a summary. Initial state takes strings and numbers kind of interchangeably, so you can also send strings and they can show up in summaries, so you can send arrows or other commands from the device up to initial state and have that nice dashboard. Something that is really interesting about this is that you can write simple Excel-like expressions into this signal key bar. So you see that it's already auto-populated with this variable named Rick. When I sent it, I called it Rick. I said this number is Rick. Rick equals 1. So that's why that is in there. I can say this equals, and I can do something like Rick plus 3. So now the answer is 7. The power here is that you can do this for kind of any type of visualization. So here, this is Rick plus 7. This line graph is Rick plus 7. So it starts out at 3 and goes up to whatever 2 plus 3 is, and then up to 7, because it's applying that expression across the whole time series that it had. You can do things like, I've only got 3 data points in here, right? But I can add new tiles with the same data, just visualized different ways. So I'll just add Rick, the gauge, Rick the line graph, and Rick the summary tile, right? So you can imagine how you can build up some pretty interesting dashboards, and we'll go through a few like demos of dashboards. You can change the background. We have recent integration with Unsplash, so you can change the background to kind of fun backgrounds or just a different color. We have some other interesting visualizations. So I'll show you this visualization later with some more data, but this is called Waves. It looks a lot like a waveform viewer, which is just signals down the left side and then data across the front, and all of that's auto-populated. And then here is like a data. You can download this data, which a lot of people do, to a systematic file like CSV, and then import that into some other system pretty easily. So this is it for some people. This is kind of a data repository type of place that they end up taking a set of their data and putting it somewhere else and analyzing it with some other tool, and that's totally possible. A couple other things that are pretty neat about state that start to get really interesting, and why maybe businesses start to use initial state. One is triggers. So this would be a very common IoT thing, but initial state has it. You can set a threshold on a signal. So I'm going to just go ahead and say that if Rick goes greater than text me at my phone number. Say done. So now I'm going to go back over to my call this the data source, and I'll say Rick equals 7. So time's gone by, right? A couple minutes has gone by. Now I'm going to say Rick equals 7. And if demo demons aren't with me, I'll get a text here in a second. If I did, hey, so what was that? 7, 8 seconds. So by the time your pipes have burst in your basement and they're spewing sewage out of the ground, you get a text and say, check the basement. So yeah, it's simple. We can template this a little bit. We can say, your signal Rick went greater than 7, things like that. Also can be an email. So it's a really nice triggering system. It's really robust. A lot of sort of real businesses are using this to do farming so that they get notifications. Yeah.
Is there an integration with Microsoft Flow?
It's not a no, but we're releasing something that is going to look a little more like a webhook, so that things, basically arbitrary integrations, can be triggered by this type of trigger. So that'll be an interesting new thing coming out pretty soon. Lastly, any other questions? Yeah.
How is this monetized at this point, or what is this literally? I assume all this is living on their servers. Yeah. Is it a monthly subscription, or what? How's this?
Yeah, subscription is $10 a month right now. That's how we monetize. It's free for students, and the only limitation there's a couple limitations for students. It's like half the amount of data, which is still a lot, and you don't get triggered SMS triggers, just because that's a real cost.
There's no data limit on it.
It's enforced by an API rate limit. So the API rate limit is 3 per second, measured over 30 seconds. So you can kind of burst data in, but you can't just hammer the system like that. In like business relationships where we want to like define a different rate limit or a higher rate limit, and that's our enterprise tier. So the individual tier, $10 a month, is 3 per
So
second.
there's a wider spread push out of a product.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know, does anybody here know David Sulky? Some people, and you should talk to David Sulky, by the way, you'd be very happy with that little deal. He is a white hat hacker. He's CISP, he's got all the acronyms after his name, and he's also a really, really, really good AWS stack developer. Maybe like our best developer in Tennessee, he keeps saying, best developer in Tennessee. I have no basis to which to say that. I think he's really good. But the system really, really scalable, and to a point where, we talk about being acquired by Tektronix. We're going into big guys and talking scalable. We're okay for their use cases. So yeah, it's pretty big. Yeah.
This. For your SMS text messaging, are you using a third-party API? If so, which one?
Twilio.
That's what I would have guessed.
Yeah. And that's why I think that costs more than with it, but it's super easy to do. Then the place where it really gets into business land as well, an interesting realm is the sharing. So there's a couple of like hobbyist sharing, can share anything publicly, and then you get a link shortened. So now I guess it would take me a second, to the Meetup Group, right? And then all of you could just click on it and open this dashboard. And that's a public share. So it's a lot of when you say anyone can access this with the link type of thing. So anyone with that link can see this dashboard. Then secure shares. So I can go and embed this or share it securely with an email. I'll just say Jamie at initialstate.com, say share this bucket with him. He'd get an email if he's a member of Initial State. It would just say, hey, log in and see this. If he wasn't, it would give him a little onboarding path, and he could log into Initial State and then look at this dashboard securely, meaning I explicitly gave him permission as Jamie, an Initial State user, and only he or other people that I give permission to see it can see it. So, a couple of interesting use cases. One is we have a lot of folks that use Initial State as a tool in their testing labs, and then they use the sharing capability to kind of bring other team members into the fold. People like bigger folks like Ingersoll Rand and Intel, a little small application for some chip testing, some chip temperature testing. So they use the sharing capability for that. But we also have businesses that either serve or make a platform or have a service that then they take these embeddable links, which are embedded via iframe. So this is like an iframe link, like a YouTube video or something in your website, a dashboard. And so what we actually have multiple people doing is taking an Initial State dashboard and embedding it inside of their service, and then their service has an item. Examples of that, there's a company out of the UK called 4DML, and they've built like a service around monitoring HVAC and air quality in big buildings. And so then back end, because they're really just web developers, but they use our whole back end to get a nice IoT data stream, then they are sort of like a dashboard for their building air quality, which is pretty neat. And the backbone of all based on Initial State, and it just uses some of the systems to share that dashboard into something else. So that's where, just business-wise, that's where we're trying to go. We kind of grew up in the mega into probably Jamie was giving that back in the day when it was very much like folks like you guys, Raspberry Pi, we're messing around in our house, we're doing hobbyist stuff, and likely we're going to work and doing engineering things. That's me totally too. And now with technology, we want to start making better work, more money, right? We're trying to get into more B2B type things, and in some ways compete with other IoT platforms. But in reality, we don't have we don't have to compete with something like ThingWorks, PTC ThingWorks, or Cumulocity, or these big like full-blown IoT platforms. But we fit really into labs, tools, things like that 4DML example, and other kind of businessy opportunities like that. So that's where we're going, but we will never lose in the maker community, and kind of, because like $10 a month, for instance, we're not trying to raise that individual price up very often. And we'll try to keep that as long as we're alive, and as long as Tektronix will let us, we will try to keep that as part of our DNA. So that is the basics of how it works. I'll just show you a couple of things, like for instance, a couple of dashboards out there that are more complex. So we have emoji support, which, yes, you can put poop on your dashboard. Let's just get that out of the way. But you can also, the emoji Unicode set is also just kind of arbitrary, interesting icons that are fully supported cross-browser in every platform. So it's kind of nice when you have things like moon phases or wind direction, thinking about the weather, or something that could be represented by one of those thousands of emojis that everyone has on their phone. You can just throw that into the dashboard. Capability, here you see line charts and graphs and summary tiles and other things like that.
Whose mapping data are you using?
This is Mapbox. Let's see some of the other ones. Yeah, so like this is you can get a little bit more complex. So we support images so that you can put an image on the background. So that an environmental chamber with 4 devices under test is a background image, and things like those check marks are emojis. and with labels. So we're kind of mixing the background with dynamic content, so you can make really custom looking dashboards like that if you want. And this is just dummy data that comes from one of our systems. Here's the actual. This is the actual Raspberry Pi running the actual tilt sensor. So the 1023 is the gravity. That's supposed to be divided by 1,000, so it's 1.023 is the gravity, and water is 1. It has to be calibrated, and I found that little jar I use, it kind of touches the side, so that totally screws up the measurement. So just know that. And then also, so it's 69. Let's see. Click on a couple other dashboards, and then we can go into questions. One of the things that I recently had the fun, this is just one of my projects, but it's kind of my show and tell, is that I just had a freezer break at my house that normally I do that for me because I lose a bunch of really good meat that I've acquired over the years. But it was actually really bad for my wife because she lost, and me, let's be honest, but she lost a bunch of breast milk frozen, right? If anybody's dads out there, this is like gold, like you talk about gold on your chips there, like this is gold for dads and moms. So I started making this dashboard, but this is actually fake, unfortunately. I couldn't find my wife stopped breastfeeding before I got around to, I should say, finding the right temperature probe to let go. And at first I just threw a SmartThings multi-purpose sensor in the freezer, and just FYI, you probably guessed it, but it didn't work very long. Worked for a little while, but it basically cracked out and froze the battery, froze some other crap in there, and just stopped working after it. So really what I needed was an external temperature probe outside of the freezer to go inside the freezer. And I will do that eventually just for the purpose of meat. But I should have done also something like monitoring the power, because this was plugged to GFCI, so it could turn off, not really just turn off at any time. So anyway, these are the kind of things that folks are doing with initial state that we are. So yeah, that's the demo.
So will any of the, like with the acquisition, will some of the Tektronix products start to include software that will automatically stream data from a device?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yes, 100% yes. The first thing I did when we got acquired by Tektronix was write a LabVIEW driver for initial state. LabVIEW is a big test and measurement programming language. How many people have used LabVIEW? Seen it? It's kind of like graphical language. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of a guru. I loved LabVIEW. For me, it was like a passion, but most real software people hate LabVIEW with a passion. Teach his own. But no, so writing LabVIEW drivers, that's one like big test and measurement entry. But what we're also doing is Keithly, and so a really good crossover application is data loggers. So Keithly's test and measurement for feed and SMUs for semiconductor tests and production tests and transistors, at a low level. And those data loggers are typically used in things like characterization, so putting a circuit or some device under test in an environmental chamber, for instance, on a vibration table in a humidity chamber, and then ramping it through crazy cycles for days, weeks, or months. That's a really great application for initial state. Those guys typically at any time. They don't want to go to the lab. They want to make sure it's still working, and they also want to have this like long-term data without having sort of like a dedicated computer. So you have a Keithly, for instance, data logger most test measurement devices nowadays have a Ethernet cable on the back, so we put initial state inside the key fleet. It sends data directly from the data logger to initial state. So there's a PC in the middle required for something like that. Oscilloscopes, we're still working on that. We have the capability to represent really fast time frames, like picoseconds. It's not something that you stream, so it's more like you take a big batch on an oscilloscope, run a triggered acquisition, and then upload that entire file to our system, and then our system will parse that out and let you sort of explore it. But those use cases, we're still trying to figure out what's really valuable about that, because there's lots of ways to view waveform taken off the oscilloscope. So we're trying to figure out what is really valuable about that, the workflow of an oscilloscope user.
Serial decoding.
In production, so serial decoding is one that's interesting, and then in production test, where the oscilloscope is used in an automated fashion to do something that it's doing over and over again, that those start to bump up on things that initial states gets interesting for.
Long term, like a glitch or something that'd be nice if it would trigger this go by something and then take that whole waveform after the glitch and put it up there and wait another 2 days or a day or whatever.
That's almost the exact code we wrote to see if there was some legs in this. So we sat down.
We'll get a whole bunch of the same thing happening over and over again, right?
And the scope was actually looking for the glitch, right? It was just nice for it to see weirdness, right? And let's just pretend it didn't actually take this long, but let's pretend it took like a day to reproduce. So you let the scope sit there, trigger, and all of a sudden it hits, and you get a text, and you say, hey, here's the data. You go to something, you see the data. That was absolutely a thought. Just like, people like, that's cool. You know, we're trying to find like really good applications. We actually talked to David for a little while during our what we call.
Happens about once a day.
Oh, really? Figured that out. No, David helped us out on just being kind of the voice of a oscilloscope user for what seems better. So it's been really interesting. I can talk about the tech acquisition all day. It's been very, I don't know, it's been great actually. Been great parts and not so great parts. Tech's a big company, maybe slow. We're a startup, just running as fast as we can, whatever direction. So if we kind of average each other out, that's the hope, is that we can really bring innovation to tech, and then they can help us get into new markets and bigger stuff. And also, if you want to see Labby, I'll stay after and we can mess around with Labby. So it doesn't run on Macs. That's your software if it doesn't cross platform. Any other questions or thoughts? And just say it has a 14-day trial. You can go and trial it anytime. It's cool. So, and then also send me an email or a text. Maybe I'll send back out. I'd rather not do it like I'd rather not send my email open Meetup forum, but like I'm happy to extend trials and give you guys special access because, you know, Nashville, right? So just look at a neat thing going on that you want to make on, I'll give you months of free time.
Excellent.
Cool.
So, well, thank you, Rick. We
Yeah.
appreciate it. Now will be opportunity to fiddle around with some things, something you want to fiddle with initial state. But thank you again for presenting.
Thank you.
I would have been very disappointed if we'd rate limited you at 15 minutes.